What is going on, everybody? John Kelly here with FightNumbers.com, here to break down UFC Auckland. First things first, going to recap last week a little bit. UFC Rio Rancho was a pretty fun card. I thought it would be. I thought it was kind of an underrated card. It ended up being pretty solid. We had a few finishes there, which is always exciting. It was a little disheartening for me. I actually was in a really good spot going into the last two fights, and I was super overweight on Pereira and Corey Anderson, as most people were. But I was pretty much all in on both of those guys. So the last two fights didn't go my way. Pretty much everything else went as expected, though. So hopefully, going to keep that momentum moving forward for UFC Auckland. As per usual, thanks for joining us, guys. If you haven't joined us before, basically we're going to break down the fights, each fight matchup. I'm going to talk about the way I see it playing out. I'm going to talk about it in terms of Draftkings scoring, which fights we want to target. I'm going to talk about the values that I'm seeing in the betting markets as well, and any questions about the card in general or the fights. Try to keep it on the fight that we are currently talking about. If not, not a big deal. We'll still talk about it. And then at the end, basically, I'll recap everything, talk about my tournament strategy and my favorite bets on the card. All right. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First fight up on the card is going to be Shayna Dobson versus Priscilla Cachoeira. If you listen to the Pat Mayo podcast, the guys over there talk about Cachoeira's nickname is Catch a Beating, and I always think that's funny because it's accurate, but yeah, that's pretty much it because it's accurate. My balls is hot. What up, hairy cheeks? Thanks for joining us. Might want to look into that. Maybe Derek Lewis has some cream he can sell you for your balls there. But yeah, so let's go ahead and dive into Priscilla Cachoeira versus Shayna Dobson. Very low level fight here. Shayna Dobson is I believe she's a police officer, but she's not very good, and neither is Cachoeira. Shayna Dobson, a 210 favorite currently in the betting markets. The comeback on Cachoeira is plus 175. Overall, not a fight that I'm really super excited on. Dobson is actually, money's been pouring in on her. She was minus 190 favorite on Monday. Now she's up to 210. So Shayna Dobson's nickname is Danger, and I hate to say it, but I have to say it. The only danger here is her being in danger of being cut by the UFC because she's lost her only two appearances and honestly didn't look good in either of them. Um, but yeah, quite frankly, her as a 2-1 favorite is something that actually more than a 2-1 favorite now, something I just have zero interest in. Even though it's against a fighter like Cachoeira. She's also winless in the UFC, having dropped all three of her appearances. So, like I said, very low level women's MMA fight. I really just want no part of paying that juice on Dobson, even though I do think that she wins. Overall, this fight is to go fight goes to decision is minus 270. So we're expecting basically a low scoring decision here by Shayna Dobson. I do expect her to get the win. Shayna Dobson by decision is the official pick, but in terms of DraftKings, I'm not interested in this fight pretty much at all. And in terms of the betting market, it's just too much to lay for Shayna Dobson, even though I think she wins. Low level fight, anything can happen. It's probably just a pass for me all around. All right, next fight up on the card. This one I definitely have more interest in is Maki Pitola versus Takashi Sato. I'm sure there's actually a few names on here that I'm definitely going to butcher. I think I got those ones pretty good. But there's definitely some on here that I do not have very good, and you will get to those later. But Maki Pitola, his nickname's Coconut Bombs. If you remember him, he came off Dana White Contender Series, and he was like a 365 favorite against Callan Potter in his debut. I was on him in that fight. He obviously did not come through for us. And now he's coming in as a slight underdog here. And I think that's why. I think recency bias definitely has something to do with that. After, dropping that big big fight to Callan Potter. But if you go back, he was really close to ending that fight a couple different times. Potter, credit to him, he fights on this card as well. He's just a really tough dude. I kind of trolled him on that card. I said he looked like a history teacher at a high school, and what do you know? He ended up coming through as a big underdog and screwed me in a bunch of lineups. So karma comes full circle. But yeah, I mean, Patola is pretty solid. He's a good boxer. He's kind of one dimensional, but he is a good boxer. And basically, Potter was able to expose the fact that Patola was just one dimensional because once he realized that he was just basically coming forward throwing really heavy bombs, especially early on. He gassed out and Potter really took over late, but Potter showed off a good chin as well. He ate some really heavy shots in that one. Um, but the matchup here, his opponent, Patola's opponent, Sato, is a southpaw. He's a striker as well. 10 of his 15 professional wins have come by knockout. He's got a nice little jab, but he is pretty hittable on the feet, which Patola is as well. So it's definitely going to be one where both of these guys eat some shots. But going back to Sato, he has a pretty bad issue of giving up his back, and his last two losses have come by rear naked choke. So that's something interesting that I think could potentially play a part here because Patolo is not a terrible grappler. He does have a couple submission victories. I think he has the power advantage on the feet and the slight advantage in general in terms of striking. And I just think he mixes it up really well. He did it on the Dana White Contender Series fight. He did it against Callan Potter. He really likes to rip the body and go body, body, head, which usually that is how you have success against Sato. Bilal Muhammad did that like repeatedly against Takashi Sato, and I mean repeatedly. He went body and then overhand left, and he did it like 5 times in a row, and it landed every single time. So I think Patola, who's a skilled enough boxer who likes to mix it up between the body and the head, I think he's going to be able to have a lot of success against Sato. And Patola was also able to take the back of Callan Potter, and Potter's a black belt. And I mentioned how Sato has a tendency to give up his back. If he does that to Patola, I think Patola can end this fight early. So, and then the last thing is, I mentioned the chin of Callan Potter. I don't think Sato has that type of chin. If Patolo hits him with some of the combos that he hit Callan Potter with, I think he's probably going to sleep. So overall, I think it could be somewhat competitive on the feet. So anything can happen, but my definitive lean is definitely on the underdog in Patolo. I think that line's due to recency bias. So I like the dog here. I like the plus money bet as well. And I'd like him to possibly get a finish. This fight is minus 190 not to go to decision. And it's actually, that was on Monday. So it's actually minus 215 now not to go to decision. So we're expecting a finish here. The official pick is Maki Patolo, coconut bombs by knockout. And then in terms of DraftKings, he's very affordable. I think he's 7.9K. Let me see if I can pull them up. Both guys are affordable, so it's like these ones that you think could be close and could go either way. It's never a bad idea to get both sides. I am confident enough. There's definitely a few fights on this card where I will have both sides. This isn't really one of them. I'm confident enough in Patola here, where I'm going to be pretty heavy on the dog. 7.9K. If he does get a finish, he's pretty much a lock for the optimal lineup, or at least has a good chance to be. So the pick is Patola by knockout. All right, next fight up on the card, Angela Hill versus Loma Lookboonmee. And this was actually originally supposed to be Hannah Goldie. She had to drop out. She had some type of shoulder injury. So who does the UFC call in the women's strawweight division? Their best friend, Angela Overkill Hill, never afraid to take any fight. She just fought on the UFC Raleigh card. I was at that fight. She had the TKO stoppage against Hannah Cyphers. Those elbows, man, you got to watch out for Angela Hill. She has those strong elbows. And basically, Loma Lookboonmee, she's a Muay Thai fighter. She debuted against Alexander Albu and looked okay in that fight. She ended up winning a split decision, but I wasn't super impressed with her. And I know like some people on MMA Twitter were kind of like really high on her. coming into that fight, and I never really saw it. I just think, she's okay, but against Angela Hill, if you guys have been listening to me, I'm a big fan of Angela Hill just as a fighter, as a person. I like her style. And I think she's legitimately good despite her record not being that good. She was actually just on the Joe Rogan podcast, and she talked about how she used to have um, mental hurdles about her record, basically, because her record wasn't great. And so it used to give her like confidence issues, but now she's pretty much over that. And it seems like she's figured it out. She's coming off of two back to back early stoppage victories. So that's always good. And really, this is worst case scenario for Luke Boonme here, just because she would have had an advantage against Hannah Goldie. Hannah Goldie's like, first of all, she's small and basically just kind of circles the octagon, throws a 1-2, circles to her left. She doesn't have a lot. And Luke Boomy would have been able to use her advantage in the clinch, which was evident against Albu. She's not going to be able to do that against Angela Hill. Angela Hill is very good in the clinch. And so basically, Luke Boonmade, the only area where I thought she was good, I mean, she does have some decent kicks, but she didn't throw them enough in the Albu fight. She basically did all of her damage in the clinch. And like I said, Angela Hill is much better than Albu in the clinch, and she'll stay just as busy as Luke Boonmay with the knees and elbows. She's always throwing those elbows. And I also think she'll be the stronger fighter in the clinch and then just the straight up more powerful striker on the feet. So when you factor all of those things in, along with the experience, Luke Boomy's only had 5 professional fights. I expect Hill to get the job done once again for us. And basically, she always stays busy enough to have that high floor on DraftKings. I do think this fight is expected to go to decision. We'll look at best fight odds here. Yeah, fight goes to decision minus 280. So the price on Angela Hill is a bit steep. I like her better when she's like low 8Ks. She's at 8,900, but she usually stays active enough to pay off that salary. And I know she had the doctor stoppage and then the TKO against Hannah Cyphers, so we can throw those out. She scored well, obviously, in both of those. But like even in decisions, Jody Escabel, that was a decision, 89 points. Nina Ansarov, she lost, but she put up 54 points. Ashley Yoder, decision, that one wasn't great because there was a lot more grappling. That was 54. But for the most part, she's landing, close to 100, if not over 100 significant strikes if the fight goes all 3 rounds. And I think what's the underrated thing about Hill is, Luke Boonmay is like a Muay Thai champion, and basically she'll do a lot of Muay Thai stuff, which was able to work against Albu. She hit her in the chin with like a teep a couple of times, stuff like that. Angela Hill's a Muay Thai champion as well, North American Muay Thai champion. So she originally started Muay Thai. She was 14-0 as an amateur in Muay Thai. That's her base. That's why she's so good with the elbows. So I just think what little advantage Luke Boonmay had in this fight against Goldie, it's just not there against Angela Hill. So I'm pretty confident in Hill. The only thing is I like the bet more than I like the DraftKings play just because she is 8,900. I'm confident in the bet at 2-1. I will lay that price on Angela Hill. As for DraftKings, I think she comes into the mix if you're playing multiple lineups. If you're only playing one or two, I'd probably pass. But if you're playing, 8 to 10 lineups, I would suggest getting maybe 2 or 3 shares of Angela Hill because she has a high floor, even if she does go to decision, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that she could finish Luke Boonmay if she ends up taking her down, getting on top, and landing some of those heavy elbows. All right, next fight up on the card is going to be Tyson Nam versus Kai Kara France. Kai Kara France minus 255 favorite. The comeback on Tyson Nam is plus 215. This fight as a whole is minus 185 to go to decision. Anyone that has listened to previous cards with Kai Kara France, my breakdowns, I'm never really high on him. I just don't think he's super talented. I don't think he's bad. I just feel like a lot of people think he's better than he is. And that was kind of evident against Brandon Morano. I was on Moreno in that fight. He ended up coming through. But basically, Kaikar France is a decent striker. He's got good takedown defense. He fights out of a good camp in Tiger Muay Thai. He's going to have the local hometown crowd. But basically, those things are only going to take you so far in the UFC. And, it works out well for him in this matchup because I think those things alone should be enough against Tyson Nam. He's basically, a striker, but not nearly as technical as Kai Kara France. And Kara France also has, the good fight IQ. He'll land those 2 and 3 piece combinations, bouncing in and out of range, circling the octagon and picking his spots to jump in and out of the pocket and land those 1-2 combos. But unless Nam is able to counter Kai Kara France with something that hurts him, then I think the most likely outcome is that he loses probably a unanimous decision, especially since it's in Kai Kara France's backyard. When it comes to DraftKings, though, Kara France is just always way too expensive. And the reason why is because he's always such a big favorite. So I really just have no interest in him in terms of DraftKings. He just doesn't put up enough volume. He doesn't land takedowns. I do think he wins a decision. Kara France by decision is the official pick. But overall, the fight's mostly a stay away for me just because, like I said, he's not the type of fighter that scores well in DraftKings. He's 9.3K, and the highest he's ever scored was 103 against Garcia. That was in his debut, but he had a knockdown in that fight and 5 advances, which generally he's not grappling, so you can scratch those advances. And he landed a knockdown against De La Rosa, but pretty much everybody lands a knockdown against De La Rosa. I think the most common outcome is like against Paiva. He landed like 58 significant strikes. I know he got 2 takedowns. I don't think he'll look to take Tyson Nam down, but we'll see. I just think he could score like 70 to 75 points, and at 9.3K, it's just not going to do it for us. So although I think he wins, it's pretty much a pass for me on DraftKings. All right, next fight up on the card is going to be Callan Potter versus Keenan Song or Song Kinan, however you pronounce it. I've seen it both. I think SureDog has it Keenan Song. Best Fight Odds has it Song Kinan. I think the UFC has it Song Kinan. So it kind of goes either way. But Song Kinan minus 190 favorite. The comeback on Potter plus 165. Song is a striker by nature. He definitely is a counter striker, I'd say. He definitely looks to counter quite a bit. 2 of his 3 UFC wins have come by knockout. And this is really one of the classic striker versus grappling type matchups, which we have a couple of those on this card. Callan Potter, I mentioned previously, fought against Maki Pitolo, came through as a big underdog in that one, showed off a durable chin. He's a black belt in BJJ. But he's not like terrible on the feet. Aside from being durable, he did have a couple heavy shots coming back to Pitolo. So we'll see how this plays out on the feet, how long it plays out on the feet. I'd be lying if I didn't if I said I didn't have some interest in Callan Potter, not just because he came through as a big underdog last time, but because I think he has, the dog in him to make this one competitive. And, he is the hometown. I believe he's an Aussie as well. So he does have the hometown pop. He came out in an interview and basically said he loves this matchup for him. He said he thinks Keenan Song he has the type of body that he loves to grapple. So he talked about showing off his grappling more so than he was able to against Maki Pitola. And I think that's possible here. Keenan Song, I mentioned, he's trying to knock people out. He's not trying to get held up against the cage and gassed out and play off his back. So I do have some interest in Potter here, and he's so cheap on DraftKings. I believe he's 7.2K. We'll pull up DraftKings scoring real quick. Potter Song. Yeah, 7.2K in that win against Pitola. He scored 86 points. And basically 3 takedowns, 1 reverse, 4 advances. So he does have the grappling upside. And at 7.2K, we don't need much from him if he wins. And aside from that, he's a finisher. I believe 16, let me double check. I think I had it somewhere. Yeah, 16 of his 18 professional wins have been finishes. So, and then Song's a finisher on the other side. He has a strong inside distance line, plus 100. Um, and basically, I think there's, if we go to best fight odds, let's see, fight doesn't go to decision is minus 170. It was minus 160 yesterday, so it looks like it's getting steamed up a little bit. I think it'll actually touch like minus 200 come Saturday. It's still Wednesday night, so there's time, but I think there is value in that because I mentioned Callan Potter as a finisher, but Song's a finisher as well. And I mentioned, he has multiple knockout wins in the UFC. I think somebody's getting a finish here, whether Callan Potter submits him, whether Callan Potter gets knocked out like he did against Jalen Turner. That's not impossible either. But overall, I do have interest in this fight. It's just the problem with Song is the price on DraftKings, and it's not necessarily a problem. It's just I don't trust him enough to make him a core play. He's 9K. When he gets the knockout win, he generally scores pretty well. Scored 96 against Hector Aldana, 107 against Nash. But in a decision against Eric Krantz, didn't look good. 64. Obviously, we need more. So I'll have pieces of both. In terms of DraftKings, my lean is Callan Potter, even though I think he loses this fight more often than not. The official pick is Song by knockout, but like I said, I think I'll probably end up with more Potter than Song on DraftKings just because of that cheap price tag. And if he wins, he's basically a lock for the optimal. And those are the type of dogs that I like to target. So um, don't, I mean, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, we'll see, Callan Potter. Hopefully we can be on the right side of Potter this time around. Next fight up on the card, Emil Meek versus Jake Matthews. This one's pretty boring. Overall, minus 195 to go to decision. Jake Matthews, the 210 favorite. The comeback on Emil Meek is plus 175. Yeah, this one's boring to me. Meek's 1-2 in the UFC. Both his losses come to Kamaru Usman and Fabinski. Both of those guys are obviously great wrestlers. If you didn't know that. And Matthews what is Matthews? He's a wrestler. He lands over two takedowns per 15 minutes. He's a black belt in BJJ. So this one's pretty straightforward. And Meek's coming off a really long layoff. I know he struggled with some injuries, but I could kind of just see this one playing out the same way. Meek's a knockout or bust fighter that generally just loses rounds, and especially against wrestlers. They're going to out wrestle him. They're going to tire him out. They're going to land takedowns. They're going to gas him out. So unless he gets a knockout and probably an early knockout, he's going to lose a decision. But because he does have the knockout power in his arsenal, I think that makes him a tournament option, although it is an extremely risky tournament option. It's just, I mentioned it before, the upside is he's very cheap on DraftKings. If he does win, it's probably coming by early knockout. So I'll have a few shares. I'm not super confident that happens. I don't trust him at all, pretty much. I think Matthews wins a three round decision here. But he's just too expensive on DraftKings for me. Doesn't land enough takedowns, and I don't think he's gonna knock Meek out. Anything can happen. It's mixed martial arts, but overall, I think Matthews gets a decision win here and probably bust his price on DraftKings. So I'm not going to spend any more time on it. Next fight up on the card, Jalen Turner, my boy, the Tarantula. I like Jalen Turner, even though he's screwed me in the past. But basically, he gets a short notice replacement. This fight was supposed to be Jamie Malarkey, which would have been a nice, probably a war back and forth against Jamie Malarkey. Now he gets Joshua Kalebo, and Joshua Kalebo is stepping up, short notice replacement to make his UFC debut after Malarkey had to pull out. Jalen Turner, the minus 220 favorite, the comeback on Kalebo is plus 180. Fight not to go to decision is minus 190. And the inside distance line for Jalen Turner is minus 110. That's one of the better inside distance lines on the slate. So Vegas is telling us we probably see Jalen Turner get a knockout finish here. And I tend to agree. The only thing is I am curious about this Kalebo. I don't know much about him, but I think, just overlooking him would probably be a mistake. In terms of the matchup, Jalen Turner's a very long and rangy southpaw. He's like 6'3", which is absolutely huge for this division. And this Kalebo guy is like 5'8" or something like that, or 5'7". Like he's literally going to be 6 inches taller than him, which is crazy. And he's always looking for the knockout, which is great for DraftKings. He's coming off the decision loss to Matt Frivola, and it was frustrating. I was on him in that fight. It was really frustrating for me because he had Frivola hurt multiple times. I think twice in the first round, or once in the first round, twice in the second round, and he just could not finish him. So credit to Frivola. Ended up getting the decision victory there, but came really close to another knockout victory for Jalen Turner. Now he's just 1-2 in the UFC. And this Kalebo guy, like I don't know if he's that much of a slouch. He's undefeated. I think only 7 professional fights though. He's a knockout artist as well. He's the local Aussie guy stepping in. So I mean, things could get interesting here. I know Jalen Turner has basically all the things going for him, but it's a knockout artist on the other end of the octagon. So you just never know what can happen when two guys are just going to stand there and slug it out. So the only other thing to mention about Kalebo, which makes me feel a little more confident in Turner, is that Kalebo is moving up in weight class as well. So not only would Turner have been way bigger anyway, but Kalebo has to move up in a weight class anyway. So this is like such a massive, massive size advantage. And then if it does go to the mat, I don't think it will, but Turner's a purple belt in BJJ. He showed off some good scrambling and submission defense against Frivola, who's a pretty good grappler and wrestler. So I expect him to have the advantage on the mat as well. So pretty much I just think Turner has the advantage everywhere. I do think he gets the knockout. I think he's more experienced, he's more powerful, and I think the size is really what I just keep going back to. He's way too big for Kalebo. He's way too big for everyone, but especially Kalebo. And I just think he pieces him up on the feet. And if he wants to, he could take it to the mat and show off his jiu-jitsu as well. Although I don't think he will. At 8.8K on DraftKings, Turner's a very strong tournament option with that inside distance line of -110. And it seems like it's trending too, because I think it's plus 110 the other day. Yeah, so plus 110 yesterday. Opened up at plus 135, now minus 110. So we like to see that in fighters that we back. Inside distance line trending the right direction. If you are going to bet it, I suggest doing it now because that price is not going to get better come Saturday. It might be like minus 130. But the official pick is Jalen Turner by knockout. And just because I'm going to be so heavy on Turner, I may end up with a sprinkle on Kalebo in the event that he is some knockout stud and maybe he puts Turner to sleep. But I don't think that happens. I'm confident in our boy Jalen Turner to get back in the win column here. And I believe that wraps up the prelims. Moving on to the main event, or the main card is going to be kicking things off. Kevin Aguilar, Zveria, Tukagov. I told you there'd be some names that I butcher. That's definitely one of them. This one I'm not interested in really at all. It's pretty much a dead even pick 'em. It looks like a little bit money came in on Kevin Aguilar, -115 favorite, and -105 for Tukagov. But I just think what this one comes down to is Aguilar is just way more active on the feet. And Tukagov only lands 2.5 significant strikes per minute. That's just not going to do it unless you're like a stud wrestler. And he is technically a wrestler, I guess, but I wouldn't say he's a stud wrestler. And so that alone should be able to win rounds for Aguilar. Just his pressure, his volume on the feet, and he has really good takedown defense. Go back and watch the fight with Barzola. I was heavy on Barzola in that fight. Most of Barzola's fights, he lands like 6, 7, 8 takedowns. He could not take Kevin Aguilar down. He has very good takedown defense, and Barzola is a better wrestler than Tukagov. So I expect basically this one to play out as advertised, in that Kevin Aguilar will stuff takedowns and be the more active fighter on the feet and land the more damaging shots and probably cruise to a decision. So Aguilar by decision is the official pick. I think in terms of DraftKings, he doesn't have much of a ceiling. I guess Tukagov would have more of a ceiling with the wrestling and grappling, but I mentioned the takedown defense of Kevin Aguilar. I don't think he really has success doing that in this matchup. So I think the line should actually favor Aguilar a little bit more. So I feel pretty confident in that. I don't hate the bet either, but overall, it's pretty much just a stay away for me. I have other fights that I'm more interested in as we move up this main card. One of them being the next one up, which is Brad Riddell versus Magomed Mustafayev. I think that one was pronounced pretty well. We'll see. Uh, we'll see come Saturday if I butchered it that bad. But basically, he opened up as minus 195 favorite, and money's been coming in on Brad Riddell all week. And I can see why. I'm on Brad Riddell here, and I'm on him pretty confidently. Although I do think this one could go either way. But I definitely see it out of Brad Riddell. I was very impressed with his UFC debut against Jamie Malarkey. He won a unanimous decision, scored over 100 DraftKings points in that decision. So we know he's active enough to where we like to see that, especially he's 7.9K, I believe, on DraftKings. If he scores 100 points at 7.9K, he's going to be on the optimal lineup. He's got a great jab. He's super quick on the feet, heavy, packs a heavy punch as well. But his opponent owns 3 UFC victories, all of which came by knockout. So basically, we're expecting somebody to take a canvas nap here. This fight as a whole, minus 215, not to go to decision. Mustafayev's inside distance line plus 125. Riddell's inside distance line plus 255. I think there's actually a little bit of value on the Riddell side, even though it's trending in the wrong direction. People definitely on Mustafayev here. But like I said, I mean, I like Riddell. I was impressed with him. I think his striking is very good. He's the local Aussie as well. I'll have both sides because you should always have both sides when it's a close striking battle where Vegas is expecting a knockout. You should always target both sides of those type of fights. But I do favor Riddell just because I think he has the speed advantage, and I like the fact that he's the local New Zealander as well. If it does go to the scorecards, that's always a little bit of security blanket for me. And when it comes to Mustafayev, he's got legitimate power as well. So don't sleep on him. I'm going to be pretty even split on this one with a slight lean to Riddell, but I'm having one of these guys in every single one of my lineups because I think this fight could be like a fight of the night candidate. It could be a very high scoring DraftKings affair. And in terms of DraftKings, they're both so cheap that basically the winner is, I mean, this is like the third time I've said this, but there's like 3 fights where the winner, regardless, is probably landing on the optimal, and this is one of them. Brad Riddell, 7.8K, Mustafayev, 8.4K. In those knockout wins, he scored 105, 109, and 79. So if he does any of that, he's paying off his price tag. And I mentioned Brad Riddell. He landed like 100, 91 significant strikes against Jamie Malarkey. So this one's going to be high pace. It's going to be good. I think it's actually going to be the funnest fight to watch outside of the main event, which should be a banger as well. So I lean Riddell. If you're making 10 lineups, I'll probably go 6 Riddell, 4 Mustafayev. So pretty even split, but with a slight lean to Riddell. Next fight up on the main card is going to be a heavyweight matchup. Ben Sassoli versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. Ben Sassoli is, if you don't know who Ben Sassoli is, he is the infamous Inhalergate opponent of Greg Hardy. If anyone remembers the fight where Greg Hardy took a couple puffs off his inhaler during the fight in between rounds, that was against Ben Sassoli, so it was ruled a no contest. Yeah, so that's Ben Sassoli, the Wombat Combat. He's got like a little mullet. But De Lima comes in as the minus 140 favorite. The comeback on Sassoli is plus 120. Sassoli's basically a southpaw striker. He's got a 1-2 punch, but that's basically where it starts and ends with him. As we saw during the Greg Hardy fight, he just doesn't have a lot aside from that. And against De Lima, that could be an issue. De Lima is very powerful. 11 of his 16 professional victories are by knockout. But Sassoli did, if anything, show off a strong chin against Greg Hardy, and he's also never been finished in his professional career. So he is durable, but that'll be tested for sure against De Lima here. And De Lima is coming off this submission loss against Stefan Struve. It was actually a year ago this weekend was that fight, and he dropped Stefan Struve in that fight, and then ended up getting submitted, which was unfortunate for him. Took a year off, and now he's back. But I have to favor him on the feet just because so his last four losses have come by submission. But the good thing for him is Sisoli doesn't present much in that department in terms of wrestling and grappling. So I think he's fine there. And I just think he's the more powerful, the more experienced, the more technical striker. So I just think, the power and the experience especially plays out here. And I think De Lima does get the knockout win. That's the official pick. He's only 8.5K on DraftKings. So if you think he gets the knockout win, that is a pretty strong play as well. And Sisoli, on the other hand, 7.7K. Maybe you think he has a little hometown magic and gets the job done, but he didn't land in volume against Greg Hardy. I don't expect him to land in volume against De Lima. So outside of like a massive power shot that sits him down, it would have to come early too. Like even if he pulls a Derek Lewis and he's losing the first two rounds and gets the knockout in the third, he'll probably still not end up on the optimal lineup with so many strong plays in the mid range. So I'll be definitely leaning De Lima on this one, and not a whole lot of Sisoli on the underdog, just because I like other underdogs better that I think will outscore him. All right, three fights left on the main card here. We have Jan Jainan versus Carolina Kovalevich. Jan is the minus 250 favorite here. The comeback on Kovalevich is plus 210. And this fight as a whole is, oh, they actually removed that prop. Huh. I wonder why that is. Well, Jan to win by decision is minus 140. I don't know why they took that down because that prop was still up there. Um, yeah, I didn't write it down, so I don't know what it is. But basically, I'm pretty confident in Jan here. Kovalevich at this point in her career is basically just a gatekeeper. She's 34 years old. She's on a three fight losing streak skid here now, and Jan is legit. Jan's the new breed, and Kovalevich basically doesn't have anything for her anywhere the fight goes. I expect Jan to pressure her, which Kovalevich has shown against her previous three opponents. When pressured, she's really not as good as she used to be. She used to be very good fighting backwards, and now I don't really see it. And the older she gets, it seems like she's really starting to lose a step. So I actually think there's some value on the Yan line at minus 250. I think come Saturday, it might creep up to minus 300. So I'm probably going to bet that. I feel confident in Yan. She has only one loss in her professional record, and that came almost 10 years ago now. I expect her to cruise right past Kovalevich, who is basically just a recognizable name at this point. I know that's kind of harsh, but just go back and watch the tape, man. Team watch the tape for this one. It's just, fighters, they don't get quicker as they get older. They start to lose a step. We've seen it against pretty much her last three opponents, Michelle Watterson, against Grasso, and I forget who's the most recent one, but yeah, she's definitely lost a step, but she's still going to come forward. And so that's why I think Jan, even though I expect her to win a decision, she's 9.2K on DraftKings. I do still have slight interest in her just because I think it's high paced enough where she could land over 100 significant strikes. We've seen previous Carolina Kovalevich fights where her opponents and her do land in heavy volume because she has that move forward mentality. Her last fight was against Grasso. She landed 90 significant strikes. Felice Herrig, 4 fights ago, 126. Jody Escobar, 127. So it's going to be a high-paced affair here. I expect both fighters to move forward. Jan's not going to back down from pressure. She landed 150 against Kondo, 94 against Angela Hill, 96 against Katie Curran. So she's definitely going to have a high floor at the very least. So I do have a little bit of interest in Jan at 9.2K, and I'm definitely confident in her betting line as well. I think there's a little bit of value there. All right, we can move on to the co-main event, which is going to be Jimmy Crute versus Michael Oleksiejczuk. And this fight not to go to decision, minus 245. Alexiejczuk is minus 130 favorite. The comeback on Crute is plus 110. And basically, money's been coming in on Crute all week so far. As you can see, Michael opened up as minus 225 favorite. He's now been bet down to minus 130. And, people love Jimmy Crute, and you got to give him credit. I kind of like Crute as well. He burned me his last time out against Serkinov. I was pretty heavy on him in that one, but that's okay. He's a really good grappler. Basically, we have the striker versus grappler matchup with Jimmy Crute being the grappler. Obviously, he's a black belt in BJJ. That's obviously his best path to victory here against the powerful striker in Michael Oleksiejczuk. Prior to that fight, Oleksiejczuk was coming off 2 straight knockout wins. He's always looking for that big punch to end the fight. I'm just going to call him Michael moving forward because I keep getting hung up on his name. But I mentioned how this fight is the strongest. Basically, Vegas thinks it has the best chance not to go to decision. So I'm just going to be super overweight on both sides. I lean with Michael just because I know money's been telling everyone to bet Crute as the underdog here. You're getting a little bit of odds value as well in terms of DraftKings, but I just think his striking is very good, and he lands so many knockdowns with his power that I could see him knocking out Jimmy Crute here. And Jimmy Crute has never been knocked out. I mentioned he only has that one professional loss, and it came by submission, but we see it all the time. People, they've never been finished, they've never been knocked out, and then they face someone like Michael, who literally has power for days. So I like I said, I mean, it could go either way. Maybe Crute's able to execute his game plan, get Michael to the ground, tire him out a little bit, take some of the air out of those heavy blows, and get his grappling going. That's possible too. And if that's the case, Jimmy Crute's going to score very well. So as I mentioned, I'll be super overweight to this fight as a whole. My lean is with Michael. Basically, I would, similar to the previous one where I said I'd go 6-4 Riddell. If playing 10 lineups, I would probably go 7 Oleksiejczuk and 3 Jimmy Crute. But I definitely wouldn't argue you if you had a stronger lean on Crute. I really can't get over the power of Oleksiejczuk, and I think that could be the difference here. All right, the main event: Dan the Hangman Hooker versus the Irish Dragon Paul Felder. Dan Hooker comes in as a minus 150 favorite. The comeback on Paul Felder plus 130. Fight as a whole not to go to decision is minus 145. Hooker has a pretty solid inside distance line at plus 140. Felder's inside distance line is plus 290, which I think is actually a little bit of value on the Felder line. It's not like Dan Hooker's invincible. He's been knocked out before. So I think there's a little bit of disrespect in the betting markets to Paul Felder. I think that comes with, traveling to Dan Hooker's backyard to fight him. You generally see that quite a bit. But both fighters coming into this one on a 2-fight win streak. Felder's going to look to play spoiler in Hooker's backyard, as I mentioned, in Auckland, New Zealand. But overall, Felder's definitely the more experienced grappler. He's a purple belt in BJJ. Hooker's only a blue belt. So I think if it does go to the mat, Felder will have the significant advantage. But let's be honest, I don't think this one's going to go to the mat. And Norris D Tank in the chat says, "Does your pink stink?" I no comment. No comment. Go back to asking about Ronda Rousey questions. I like those ones better. But yeah, so Felder, I mentioned the grappling advantage, but I don't think this one goes to the mat. I think obviously they're going to stand and bang. We know what these guys are going to do. They're going to stand across from each other and just wing bombs. And I mentioned before, these type of fights, it really could go either way. Now, I do have a lean. My lean is Dan Hooker, but it's not a strong lean at all. And I'm going to have Paul Felder as well, especially since Paul Felder's much cheaper on DraftKings. I think Dan Hooker's 8.7, I want to say. Yeah, 8.7, and Paul Felder's 7.5. But when Dan Hooker wins, it's generally by knockout. I know he's coming off the decision win against Ally Quinta. Even in that decision, though, landed a knockdown, 98 significant strikes, scored well on DraftKings. knocked out James Vick in the first round, knocked out Gilbert Burns in the first round, knocked out James Miller in the first round. So generally, he's a knockout guy. And then Paul Felder, he's got some finishes as well. More of a decision guy lately, but he does have knockouts to his record, and he's just much cheaper at 7.5K. That in a 5 round fight, even in a decision, I think he pays off that price. So I think both of these guys are enticing on DraftKings. I lean Dan Hooker as the hometown fighter in his backyard, as the probably more powerful fighter, I'd say. I just think he has the power advantage. Felder's going to have to watch out for those knees. Dan Hooker has some very heavy knees that he likes to throw. And then I mentioned the hometown pop as well. If by chance this does go all 5 rounds and hits the scorecard, I do feel good about having the local in Dan Hooker. So Hooker by decision is the official pick, although I think any outcome really wouldn't surprise me. If he knocked out Paul Felder, I wouldn't be shocked. If Paul Felder knocked out him, I wouldn't be super shocked. If Paul Felder won a decision, I wouldn't be surprised. So this is kind of one of those where pretty much any outcome, it's not going to surprise me. I mentioned I do have a slight lean towards Hooker. That will be reflected in my DraftKings lineups, although it's kind of just one of those fights where I'd probably question if someone said they had a very confident lean in this one. I would definitely want to talk to him because I don't have a super confident lean. I do lean Hooker, but it's not a lock by any means. Definitely more confident on some of the other earlier fights in the card, like Angela Hill, like Jan. Those ones I definitely feel better about than this Dan Hooker one. So that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and do a quick recap. That wraps up the card for UFC Auckland. Any questions? I'll hang out here for a minute as I recap it. Any questions? Get them in the chat now. Um, some of my favorite bets on this card, I mentioned Maki Pitola plus 110. I like the plus money on him. I do think there's value in his inside distance line as well, because if he does win, I think it comes by knockout. And his inside distance line is currently plus 190. So I think, getting 2-1 on your money for a Coconut Bombs knockout is probably worth it. I like Angela Hill at minus 200. I'm okay with paying 2-1 because I'm very confident in that matchup on Angela Hill. I like Brad Riddell as the underdog, getting plus money on him, plus 115. I think there's a little bit of value there. And then I mentioned the Jan fight against Karolina Kalvakovic, minus 250. I would bet that all the way up to minus 300. That's how good I feel about that one. So I'll be mixing up a lot of those into parlays and stuff like that with some of the other ones that I'm less confident in, just trying to build some equity and maybe cash out or hedge later on in the card. But in terms of DraftKings, there's definitely, this is going to be a fun card. A lot of finishes are expected according to Vegas. The mid range is absolutely stacked. I mentioned from 7.7K to 8.5K, there's like every single fight you need to have exposure to because they're just going to score so well. So I think it's going to be a very fun card, a lot of live underdogs, a lot of people that we could see a potential finish. And we're just going to keep the good vibes rolling. And I mentioned, this stream sponsored by Fight Numbers. That's my website, fightnumbers.com. Every week I have the video replay up on the site. I have an in-depth breakdown article, which is very similar to this video, goes into a little bit more detail. That'll be posted later on tonight, along with tomorrow and Friday. I'll have DraftKings player rankings up, broken down by range. I'll have ownership projections as well. And then on Saturdays, usually around noon, I'll have the line movement page updated where you can see where the money's moving on different fight matchups. All of this stuff, I created this website because I think it's valuable for any MMA DFS player and bettor in general. It's just different resources that I like to have as a player. So I'm trying to provide that to everyone else, basically. And I don't ask for anything in return. All of this is completely free. All that I ask of you is that you support my content, you share it, you press the heart button on my Twitch channel. I'm at 42 followers. My goal is to get to 50. Please help me get there. I definitely appreciate it. Check out fightnumbers.com. We have a YouTube page up as well. And if you prefer the audio version, we are on Spotify, Stitcher, and iTunes as well. So I definitely appreciate the support, guys. Good luck this week, and I will see you next time.